Yeah.
But Jack lost his budget for the barbecue, so we couldn't party.
Hello, and welcome to the Media Reporter. Today we have a very exciting three-person roundtable to discuss Cahterine Crier's new book, Patriot Acts. It's really a call to action to all of us to really engage and try to take back our nation. She really cuts through all the partisan rhetoric and all the nonsense and puts forth very straightforward, very plainly stated reforms about all the issues, most of the issues that plague our nation today, including national security, education, healthcare, constitutional issues, and that's just to name a few. We are lucky enough to have Cahterine with us today. Thank you so much. She was the youngest elected state judge in Texas history. She covered national and international affairs at CNN, Court TV, ABC, and Fox. She's also an Emmy Award-winning journalist and a New York Times bestselling author of A Deadly Game and The Case Against Lawyers. We also have with us Nadine Strossen. She was the president of the ACLU from 91 through 2008. She's also a professor here at New York Law School. Thank you for being with us.
Great to be here.
And our last guest is Michelle Zierler. She is the director of the program for law and journalism at New York Law School. And she started a blog at New York Law School called Legal as She Is Spoke, which was just nominated as one of the top 100 legal blogs by the ABA. So that's exciting news for my alma mater. So, so let's get started with some of the subjects. So one of the overarching themes in your book really always ends up tying back to the incestuous relationship, as you call it, between corporations and government, and how far we've strayed from the true notion of capitalism and our founding fathers' ideals. Do you want to talk about kind of the evolution and how we've strayed so far from our intended course?
Yeah, economics is such a core issue, whether you're talking about national security, education, immigration. All of it ties back to economics and, of course, Wall Street, the economic crisis that we've been dealing with. But I thought it was very interesting to listen to conservatives today talk about things like we want low taxes, we want government out of our lives, we want to deregulate everything, we believe in free markets and free enterprise. And then to go back to the founders and say, who were the conservatives then? Is that the same message that Alexander Hamilton and John Adams were delivering to us? Actually, no. They sound much more like Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin, who were the radical liberals, going small government, government out of our lives, low taxes, strict construction of the Constitution. And in fact, the conservatives were supportive of a monarchy. They wanted a hereditary Senate. First thing that Alexander Hamilton did when he became Secretary of Treasury was create a national debt. He bought up all the state revolutionary debt. He said, I want to control this. I want more power in the central government. All these sorts of things. And in 1776, the year of our Declaration, Adam Smith wrote Wealth of Nations. Same year. Interestingly, Alexander Hamilton, the conservative, didn't like the book. Because what was he doing? Well, Adam Smith was saying, in England, the marriage of big government and big business disrupted economic opportunity for most British citizens. Not only the laborers were oppressed, but small businesses, entrepreneurs, innovation. It was a concentration of wealth and power at the top, married to big government, mercantilism, that oppressed economic opportunity. On the other hand, Thomas Jefferson said, oh my goodness, this is the perfect corollary to the political system, this democratic opportunity, political opportunity that we're creating in this country. So he loved Adam Smith's capitalism. And you can see an interesting attitude as you move through the evolution of liberal and conservative ideology in this country. It all stems from those origins, politically and economically.
So how do we cut through all the rhetoric and all the labeling as, one party's always saying, we're the true Democrat, we stay the truest to the founding principles. How do we cut through all the rhetoric and really find the facts that we need to take back our country.
Read this book.
Exactly.
I must say that I teach law and journalism, and I am a news junkie. 2 hours of my day goes by when I wake up before I even do anything else, and I've read the papers. And I realize I'm woefully uninformed, and much better informed now having read the book. One thing you talk about is about how Adam Smith, the conservatives now sort of embrace him as the capitalist ideal, and that's not really what he was saying.
Well, it's quite extraordinary because Adam Smith, the famous invisible hand reference, which appears once in his treatise, and therefore we're supposed to keep hands off the markets, that free, unfettered markets
Right, the Tea
are what
Party.
capitalism is all about. But in fact, he wrote the book to denounce concentrated wealth and power at the top, big government, big business. We forget all of that stuff. And he said, in fact, in small markets, it's sort of like Thomas Jefferson said that local small democracy really works best. The bigger it gets, the more difficult true democracy is to engage in. Same thing with capitalism. If you're talking about a town, somebody raises the prices, the consumers can affect the market. But when you're talking about a big arena, and you allow, it's the Walmarts, it's the multinationals to dictate to the rest of the market, you're destroying any concept of free markets.
I thought it was so interesting when you know, to go back to your question, Deva, about how do we cut through the sloganeering and the oversimplification and the stereotyping and bashing that go on through the two major political parties demonizing each other and each having a slogan. How do we get behind the slogans, A, to the facts, B, to the analysis, C, what have we learned from history, and of course start by reading this book, which is just a wonderful synthesis of all of the above on many issues, but also education in general. Right now we are professional educators, and I think that how do we encourage people to not necessarily believe the slogans that they hear? I hear that about the internet all the time. Oh, people are going to see things and they're just going to assume they're true. We have to make all of our citizens, that is people who are members of our political community, which to me includes immigrants, and you have a wonderful discussion of that topic as well. We have to make them, empower them to know that they should question everything they hear, do their own research, come up with their own analysis. And Cahterine has made that very easy and facilitated. She has footnotes. Being a wonk, I looked at the footnotes. It's an impressively scholarly work, but also very easy reading.
Very accessible.
I actually thought of
Well, the good lawyer
requiring
in me, and we were laughing. One of my favorite quotes in the book is from John Adams when he says, "Ideology is the science of idiots," and I have always been, maybe the good lawyer and judge, wed to empirical evidence, wed to facts. And you can have your own opinion, but you can't have your own facts. We know this. And right now, in the 21st century, to look out on the media landscape, the political landscape, and think we have not moved from George Orwell's view of a passive population that is so easily manipulated that propaganda in the age of the internet, when any of us in 20 seconds with Google can find empirical evidence, that we could be so easily swayed. I find it very disturbing.
Part of it might be wishful thinking, right? So I think one of the themes that goes through the book is people wanting to have their cake and eat it too. So they want to pay less taxes, but of course they want all of the government benefits that they already get and more.
Well, it's like less taxes. We are taxed at a lower rate than in virtually 60 years, and yet if you were to stop many people on the street, they would think that we were under this heavy tax burden in an extraordinary situation.
In Park, they actually interviewed people and they gave them some false percentage number and they said, we want more, and they're like, you have more than that now. So even the people who are mobilizing to action, they're not even aware of the facts.
I thought one of the other interesting themes that you stressed, Cahterine, is the bashing of government. I don't think you can get elected today without being against government. And what an idiotic statement that is by ideologues, because even going back to Adam Smith and other classic conservative economists, you point out stress that government is necessary in order to, to create the infrastructure that promotes capitalism to flourish, and B, to hold in check excessively large business that actually stifles opportunities for individuals.
And it wasn't until the Great Depression. I mean, even FDR campaigning in '32 was campaigning small government, low taxes, going after Hoover for big government and all that sort of thing. And it was only in responding to the Depression did the Democrats suddenly become this party of government. Yeah.
And one point you also made in the book that I thought was just so sweet was the point about how you need both in parents. Maybe the parent who is a little bit more disciplinarian and the parent who's a little bit more maybe nurturing. And without the discipline, there is anarchy. And without the nurturing, there are no, let's say, in government-wise, social services. So it's just a very good analogy.
As as an activist, I read the book. I actually read it twice. I read the underlinings the second time, and after the first time, I was very angry and very frustrated. The book starts very dramatically. I am afraid for the future of my country. I still get chills because I feel that way. And all of my friends are all activists. You can't be an activist without being an optimist, but yet I will say, for the first time in my life, I really am afraid.
Is it really the first time in your life?
And so the question, because, it's because of the confluence of issues. Civil liberties, which I've specialized in my entire life, have taken such a beating. It's a major theme in Catherine's book. It hasn't mattered whether it's Obama or Bush. I mean, civil liberties have taken a nosedive in a way that most people are unaware of, without advancing national security. After 9/11, the ACLU's immediate theme was a campaign for safety and freedom. And I was amazed to see that very famous speech by Eisenhower. I had read the part about the industrial military complex warning against that, but the last line that you quote I had not seen before, where he said that national security and civil liberties are mutually reinforcing.
That's right.
We have to protect both of them. But that everything seems to be unraveling, the healthcare system, the education system, the infrastructure, national security itself being unraveled. So as an activist, my first time through was, you do a brilliant job in explaining the problems, but where are the solutions? And so I went back and reread my underlinings, and I was going to ask you a question, Cahterine, but I hope I know what the answer is. The question was going to be, if you could pick one single reform that you could wave a magic wand or be active for, what would it be if you had to pick one?
I'm going to cheat and give you the one, and
I
then.
almost want to guess. I almost want to guess and see if I'm in there with you.
Okay. Because it was last night I was at the Carter Center, and they were asking what one Supreme Court decision, and it would be the Santa Clara Railroad. It would be the corporations and corporations and personhood. It would be getting corporate money out of politics. But the personhood of corporations, corporate money out of politics, that has to be the focus, because right now, and we've known for a very long time, that corporate money has basically bought Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill. Our representatives do not represent their constituents, the people, the human beings that voted them in. They represent these multinational corporations. My biggest concern, and the reason I am truly, truly afraid, is even in the Gilded Age, the late 1800s, the early 1900s, big corporations, the robber barons, making lots of money. Upton Sinclair had to write The Jungle. The Socialist Party had its One Moment in the Sun, which wasn't 2010, dears, it was 1910, and has disappeared since then. Yeah, but what we've done is is not understood that that corporations will completely dominate and control. And at this point,
if I may, Cahterine, that is still describing the problem. And see, the activist me says, what specific reform? And overturning the Supreme Court decision wouldn't be the reform. But you answered it twice in your book. You made the point twice.
You want her to
that
guess how she did
public financing.
Oh, sure.
Because
that's the ideal.
Because
That's
the so-called
ideal.
reforms that we have now
Yeah.
of cutting off, putting restrictions on financing demonstrably have not worked. And many people know that the ACLU has opposed it, not because it violates free speech and freedom of association. Yeah. After all, we are a corporation. We were stifled from criticizing the Patriot Act under the so-called campaign finance reform. But our other point is that it is demonstrably ineffective and even counterproductive. And what can you expect, and you make this point very well, from incumbents? They're going to pass something that functions as an incumbent Protection Act, and that's exactly how the
punchline that really concerns me on this, sort of losing train of thought there, is that in those days, in those early days, even when they were making a lot of money, the money tended to stay in the United States.
Yeah.
So yes, they got a lot, but they were building universities and hospitals and
hiring people.
And we were able to deal with the inequities to some extent. Now we're talking about these multinational, transnational corporations that may have an American flag, but they're doing business overseas. They're not only shipping jobs, the manufacturing jobs, proprietary information, our research, our educational facilities, our development facilities. And if they are the ones buying Washington, then the policies coming out of Washington are supporting overseas corporations. They are no longer concerned about the economic well-being of the United States of America. I'm not talking about the worker.
Just our country.
I'm
even
talking
more
about
generally.
the United States as a consuming nation is not in the forefront of their thinking.
So how do you cut that Gordian knot between politicians of both major political parties and these corporations that are out as their charters proclaim? In fact, they have a legal responsibility under corporate
make
law
money.
to
Maximize
money
profit.
for their shareholders,
Absolutely.
not for
That should pay
anybody
a
else.
cost.
And I think the only way that any reforms get started is to, quote the opening words of the Constitution, we the people. I mean, we are the government. I loved that cartoon that you had there, which showed we the corporations. And many people are very surprised to find out how relatively small an investment it would take. I mean, a pittance compared to so many budgetary items now. If we had complete public financing of every single ballot qualified candidate for every office from dog catcher to president of the United States, it adds up to less than the advertising budget of a major corporation. And what more important investment could we make in our democracy than to allow every qualified candidate to run? We would have our choice. They wouldn't have to race around raising money. They wouldn't be beholden to corporate or any other, quote, special interests other than through the power of persuasion.
That's right.
And we are not going to get that reform through incumbent members of the government.
No,
So-
the American people are going to have to do this, and there have been several movements. Dylan Ratigan over at MSNBC started his Get Money Out campaign. He's now merged it, I think, with a couple of actually big corporate CEOs that are saying, we're not giving any more money, this is wrong. So there are some movements that are beginning to snowball a bit, and the American people have to understand that we need to play. We need to get involved, because unless there is, this tremendous weight of a voting population to frighten the elected representatives on Capitol Hill, they will never do it. And it's going to take a constitutional amendment to change this.
And it is very interesting.
A constitutional amendment would require the votes of of Congress.
Well, they would.
But the American people have to make it clear that you guys do this or you're out.
Make it clear.
You're out.
How do we do this?
I think there are plenty of ways. I laugh when I tell people that I remember when Americans got so upset about getting calls on Saturday night from telephone solicitors, and it was at about a week's time that Congress passed legislation to stop those 8 p.m.
That's so
Saturday
true.
night calls. And I'm going, we can't do that.
Yeah.
For
especially
campaign
with
finance
being
reform.
able to organize with the tools of the internet. I was thinking
yes.
a more wonky answer. There is an alternative approach for under the Constitution for amending it, which has never been used in our history, but the states also could initiate those reforms. Now again, they will respond. You know, the first serious free speech scholar in the United States, Zechariah Chaffee, said, ultimately, the American people will have as much free speech as they want. And you could say that about every single issue because we do ultimately have the power. We've just chosen to delegate it.
We do for now. And this is, again,
A republic as long
why I am frightened, because I see so many institutional changes that have been going through slowly. Obviously, the gerrymandering has been a problem for years, and the money in politics. But now the attack on voter rights, limiting millions of people's opportunity to vote. There was the REINS Act a couple of days ago that was passed in the House. Now they've made this attempt several times. The Senate's not passing it, but trying to wrest regulatory control from agencies to Congress. Well, if Congress is being basically bought off, we know what's going to happen to the regulatory arm of the government. The filibuster rules, all sorts of things.
So anti-democratic.
To make it, there was a conservative elected official who said several months ago, for the foreseeable future, the Republicans are going to control the government. And the interviewer said, well, wait a minute, Obama was elected and Democrats can get elected. And he said, yes, but we're going to make sure they can't govern. And so what you're talking about is skewing the rules. Now, when James Madison got the Constitution passed, it was called the Grand Compromise. Because he had the liberals and the conservatives arguing, was it going to be an aristocratic government? Was it going to be truly something for the common man? Who was going to have control? And he's saying, no, we're going to have a level playing field with rules of the game, and every 2 and 4 years, the American people will decide which direction we're going to take the country. But right now, we're seeing the system itself, which is part of why I'm saying to preserve the republic, the system is being skewed such that you actually could see a destruction of the political system that we think we have.
I'm sorry, this very lack of intra-party congeniality, and politeness, it sounds very trite, but this is part of the reason why people are not engaged. They see that even within parties, the super committee can't reach any kind of agreement on deficit reduction. That's just one example. And I mean, it's hard to get engaged when you see that even within the parties, there's very little compromise being made.
And that there seems to be more concern about maintaining power for its own sake and putting the welfare of the nation second to that. That's very troubling. So, I mean, this is also a call to arms for people of goodwill with values and integrity and ethics to run for office. And I think all of us who've read your book think that you should run for office.
I do. You had said that, and I have to say, I sent you the question, and I'm sure you.
As an independent, obviously.
Well, I'm so angry with both parties. As Will Rogers famously said, he said, I'm not a member of an organized party, I'm a Democrat. Well, that's, the Republicans have always been pretty darn organized, and they really pretty focused. Democrats, on the other hand, kind of scattered and all over the place. But I think that both political parties are not respecting the system that we have to preserve first before we have our ideological battles. And back to education, I don't think many people today really have an understanding of political philosophy, the development, the evolution of ideology, how we got to where we are today, why arguments are made on the right and the left. And therefore they're spouting words, they have no meaning, they're defending them to the death, and yet they don't understand the origins, and they don't understand the repercussions of their policies.
I have to admit, it wasn't until con law in law school that I really understood the inner working. I went to a great university. I won't say which one to put it down, but until I got to law school and really understood the inner workings, and that's when I became less ignorant. So I can only imagine.
It's quite frightening right
Yeah.
now because I was on a committee for the ABA a number of years ago, and Sandra Day O'Connor and Mike Greco, who was then the president of the ABA, several others on this committee, and one of our missions was trying to reintroduce civics education to
Oh,
schools.
that's such a big
Well,
concern for her.
Justice O'Connor told us in our first meeting, she said she was at West Point talking to a group of upperclassmen and discussing the three branches of government. And the group of students couldn't explain to her
That's exactly
our
right.
system of government. And this was really when we were just starting to get this teaching to the test and standardized, push for standardized education. And in the book, I talk about some of our professors going over to China, and of course, they're beginning to compete now in international scholastics and just soaring scores. And the Chinese were laughing at us, and the professors were confused. They said, well, for years, we had this rote system, you know, you're marching along, memorization, this kind of thing. And then we realized the brilliance of your creative, innovative, open education system where you actually taught kids to think.
But you have to combine it
Right.
with basic information.
Oh, sure, you've got to have that foundation. But it's we went through schooling like this. We really were at the height, I think. And now the Chinese were laughing, and now you're doing what we did, just as we're trying to copy your successful model.
Yeah, that was one of the sad things because, you know, I'm sure all of us are, I'm not going to speak for other people, but like you, Cahterine, you do describe this a lot. I'm super patriotic. I mean, I've devoted my entire life to the values that this country was founded on and conserving them. So I think in some sense I'm a very conservative person. Against shifting factual situations because we don't learn from history, and every time there's a new technological development, oh, the internet, this is different, this is dangerous, we have to censor it. You know, I could go in many different directions, but I think the internet is one of the issues that you raise that I think is so important, that if the big corporations, as they are increasingly threatening to do, use their economic dominance to stifle who gets access to the internet, is going to take what had been potentially the greatest engine for self-expression, for organization, for empowerment of individuals, and turn that into a tool for more corporate hegemony.
Well, in the
And
American...
not to interrupt, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. This is it for segment 1. Thank you all. Hopefully we'll have time for another segment. And everyone really, really, really should read Patriot Acts by Cahterine Crier. Thank you for joining us.